Again, welcome to our series on tools within Civil 3D, and specifically today, corridor modeling. So there's a couple things that I want to talk about first. One of the things is that I've run into some challenges with multiple individuals who have either just started using Civil 3D, are kind of in the middle of Civil 3D, and then kind of a little bit more advanced than in the middle. So that proposes just a small problem when we're doing these series of webcasts in terms of how much time that's enabled to give for the actual web series. So one of the things I had thought about doing was specific to, let's say, corridor modeling, opposed to a 40-minute fly through in terms of working with corridors. I'm now thinking of doing a 2.5 hour series on going step by step, piece by piece, in terms of the workflow, in terms of working from basic corridor modeling to intermediate corridor modeling to advanced corridor modeling. So if any of you might have an interest in doing something like that, whether it's corridor modeling, site grading, height networks, InfraWorks, workflows connected with the AEC collection, please, by all means, reach out to Amy in reference to an interest for that. And we'll put some things together in terms of addressing those issues, because everyone's not at the same pace in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. And there's some things that I've kind of seen on YouTube in reference to some of these videos, and they kind of, take out a lot of what's necessary in terms of workflows working with any of the tools with Civil 3D. But as it is, we shall try to challenge in terms of working with corridors. And today we may not get through all of working with corridors, but I want to lay out the basic fundamentals in terms of what a civil consulting firm or surveying firm may go through. So clearly the world is 3D, but almost every design that you run into starts out with this concept in terms of a flat line or a flat piece of paper. So in reference to corridor modeling, we usually think transportation, but not so fast, because corridor modeling comes with Civil 3D more tools that you can utilize. So to goals for today, at the end of this session here, we would specifically know the three main components for a road corridor, laying out a path in terms of alignments, and then maybe cut to the chase to do some profiles. And then specifically, there are situations where someone will create a corridor like in seconds to kind of show you. But that process requires step by step and a specific workflow. So I'm going to give you a combination of them all. And then maybe for part two, we can get more into some detailed things. So again, I'm going to start out with these components of alignments, profiles, and then with a corridor, assembly, subassembly, and then creating this three-dimensional corridor that we really never print or plot. But it gives us a lot of modeling information in terms of what we want to be able to do. So corridor targets, creating a surface, corridor surface. I mean, clearly we start out, the world is 3D, right? So we start out with woods in an area from a parcel or a property. And from that, we get to the point of doing construction. So there's some things that we want to be able to do. So with the corridor model, we want to be able to kind of go from a picture to that actual model in Civil 3D. And to get to that point sometimes requires more than just that big red easy button that we've been seeing for years and years now. So clearly on the left-hand side, it's a picture. On the right-hand side, we have a model of that picture. So things to consider. Again, understanding corridors. You can create Civil 3D flexible configurable 3D models of corridors, roads, highways, railways, ditches, streams. A lot of those things we can address. So the three main components for road corridor: horizontal alignment in relation to the surface, a profile that shows the vertical and the surface, and then also an assembly or a template for our corridor cross section. So we're going to try to get through those things again based upon the time frame. Either I start talking really, really fast, and those who are beginners are going to miss a lot of things, or talk really, really slow, and the intermediate and advanced individuals who are listening are going to say, would you talk faster? So I'm going to try to address these things one by one to accommodate for everyone. So three main components for a road corridor, no matter what you do. And then now in 2018, a feature line and some other things you can build a corridor with. But for the three main components for a road corridor: an alignment, which is our 2D center line baseline, a profile that shows our 2D layout in 3D on a vertical profile, and then an assembly, which is our typical section or our cross section. And then from that, create an assembly. There's multiple things that we can utilize to create an assembly, whether it's basic travel lanes, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, slopes, tying into the existing ground. Those things really build our typical section, and we're going to take a look at that. So from the basic fundamentals, build a single baseline corridor from an alignment profile assembly, create a corridor surface, add a boundary to create that surface, which gives us our contours that we can show from our model. Corridors will be built from at least one alignment, a profile, and an assembly. Also, now within corridor modeling 2018, we have some really flexible rehab sub-assemblies and tools that we can utilize also. Okay, so simple alignment, profile, and an assembly. We always want to have that on rebuild automatically. For those who are just now getting into Civil 3D, the anatomy of a corridor. We have feature lines that are generated automatically. We have points, we have shapes, and we have links that go from point code to point code. So points, shapes, and links. So then we want to tie into the existing ground. So we have daylighting. So some really quick things here. By the end of the series, we're going to be able to add a corridor baseline for a cul-de-sac, add an alignment, profile targets, a region for a cul-de-sac, and then an interactive boundary for a corridor surface. We are going to do those things. We're going to model it one at a time. And even if we use an alignment and profile targets, we can model a roadside swale. So it doesn't always have to be a corridor. Now we can target polylines, feature lines, alignments, and profiles can be extracted. So a lot of information in a short period of time. And then we also have this ideal of an intersection, also a roundabout. So those are some things that we run into that present more of a challenge in terms of what we want to try to create and design. So in terms of a pure road intersection, specific regions, curbs, normal grade, we have different things going on that we want to be able to address in your intersection. So you have to plan for your model. So those who are really starting out with Civil 3D, you have to plan for your model. Each region requires something specific in terms of targeting and its alignments, and specifically different assemblies. So we're going to take a look at those things also. So component considerations: assembly, baseline, edge of pavement, alignments for my curb returns. So those are the kind of things we need. And for drainage purposes, baselines, regions, and targets. So we get those cross slopes coming in. depending on what we want for the crown of our road, whether we want it all maintained or just one road as my crown. So just some different things in terms of what you're going to be running into, and then making those adjustments. So these things that I'm kind of talking about right now is that 3 hour or that 2.5 hour session that we want to be able to dig deep down into. But as of right now, we're just kind of quickly overviewing some of the things that are necessary in terms of the baseline, regions, targets, whether it's a corridor, cul-de-sac, or a roundabout, or just a typical road. Okay, even when we need to widen an offset assembly, a knuckle, target alignment and profile, those are things that are required. And just things to wonder about in my past history, you know, site grading. Explain the functions of a site, concepts of grading, feature lines, grading criteria. Those are the things that we want to think about for our next. So before the questions start, we want to jump into the demonstration. So I wasn't trying to take up too much time for that, but as we start out, again, the world is 3D. So we really should be designing around a basic concept to get an idea of our horizontal placement. In order to do that, what we typically will have is we'll have a layout of parcels. From that layout of parcels, we want a horizontal alignment that kind of drives much of our design. From that design, that's going to tell us how to edit and analyze it. Those who have been using Civil 3D typically run into, you know, well, how styles should be involved and how labeling is going to come up. And finally, how is this going to work with my overall project? So in the beginning, if we just look at things here, one of the things we would start out first with, you know, sometimes we get drawings. As a user stated to me the other day, well, you know, I don't do this stuff. I get a drawing from an architect. I get a drawing from someone who's created this stuff for me. I just need to know how to create this stuff in Civil 3D. So I just want to give a couple different scenarios. And one would be create an alignment straight from the polylines that an individual gives you. The other would be, you know, reversing that alignment, making sure everything is tangent from the data that they give you. Also, manipulating and modifying the specific objects of that alignment, whether I want to modify the curve, point of tangency, point of intersection. So those are just some of the things. And then one of the things that's critical is the site that we put these things in. So just as an example, just going to move this back just a little bit so everyone can see my screen. And there's going to be some tools on here that some of you may say, where in the heck did he get those from? And if that is the case, that's what some of our questions are for. So for instance, like these over here, these are some tools that you probably just don't get straight from AutoCAD. And again, this is the interface for AutoCAD. As you can see, I got my nice little simple PDF creator up there. Import a PDF. Some really simple things. If you're using Civil 3D, then you should be using river analysis. You should have the geotechnical. We should have vehicle tracking. We should have Autodesk InfoWorks. So these are some of the things, if you have the AEC collection, we can create 3-hour sessions in terms of how to work with all of these in collaboration. So back to the ideal of working with alignments. Here I just have some lines. So from the individual that gave me this drawing, they were saying, well, we've just basically got lines here. How do we create this data into Civil 3D objects? So the first thing that we want to take a look at is we want to take a look at the idea of creating alignments from objects. So I always think of alignment entities as freedom to work with. So alignments consist of, you know, 3 types of entities: lines, arcs, and spirals. Segments that control the horizontal, and their relationships to one another that we want to kind of take a look at. So we want to create an alignment from a polyline. It's pretty straightforward. So if I look down here at the bottom, there's a giant polyline. One of the things that you're going to run into is we got polylines going across the site and up the site. So now you have to think about this process of laying things out, how you want to address those. So from this, I can just go up here and select alignments. I want to create an alignment from a polyline. You can do the same thing from the ribbon. I can create an alignment from an object. I'll create an alignment from an object, select the polyline. It shows me an arrow in the direction that that line is going in. So I can either hit R for reverse to switch it up, but I want it going from right to left because the site, even though it's flowing from left to right in terms of plan and profile sheets, I want it flowing left to right, right to left because it goes up the site also. So I'll just hit enter. It brings up this dialog box. First thing I want to do is put in this name. We'll put in this name called Rose Drive. How about that? Rose Drive, an old friend of mine's. And there's different type of alignments. I'm going to select center line alignment. From that, we're going to start at station 0. From that station 0, I want to be able to give it a specific name, station, and then these different tabs down here, general information in terms of what site it's going in. I do have a site called none. Over here on the sites, there is no site yet, but I do have a site called none. I'm going to have it on the center line alignment layer called C row and all labels. And then curves, you have to think about, do you want curves in between? Well, my polyline already has curves in between. So I'm just going to deselect that. Then I want to erase the existing entity. And then if I think about what I'm doing in terms of my design criteria and parameters, do I want this to have a design speed and use design-based criteria based upon AASHTO standards? Based upon these AASHTO standards, you have options in terms of roadway design for roundabouts, roadway, and if you're in the state of Florida, FDOT parameters. So I'm gonna go ahead and cancel that. And I don't want to use my criteria-based design, and I just select OK. And there's my alignment. Pretty straightforward. Now, you guys didn't say anything about that arrow going in that direction. So one of the things I can quickly do under alignments is reverse alignment direction. I'll pick on my alignment. It says, warning, reverse alignment, remove all stations and equations. I'm OK with that. Now I'm at station 0. So it's put a curve in there. Pretty straightforward in terms of my alignment. Now, from that, I want to create another alignment. So I got more polylines here from these alignments. I'm going to create this alignment now. So this alignment, create alignment from object. If I pick on it, if I zoom in on this, I'll hit enter to accept that. And then this alignment, I'm going to give it a name, and not really an untypical name. I'm just going to call it Alex. Something simple, so I don't have to type much. Alex Avenue. So from that, same parameters, no curves. There aren't any vertexes in here, so it's not going to put any curves in here. I'll just select OK. But this won't be basic. We'll select existing because someone said to me the other day, well, I'm going to be using styles on everything I do. Okay, well, we'll show different styles. So from that, we're going to create another alignment. From that alignment, we're going to check from the ribbon. We're going to select create alignment from objects. Same process. If I pick on this, hit enter, I'm going to give this alignment a name. This alignment is going to be Parker Avenue. From this, we're going to have a layout style. So something a little bit different. And I like that layout style. See how that curve is blue in between those two tangents? I like that. So from that layout style, we should be coming from left to right. So my last alignment, pretty straightforward. I pick on my alignment, right click, hit enter. We're going to do my layout style and select OK. So there's my layout style for my alignment. And it's going from left to right. Any point in time down here under alignments, center line alignments, I can come down and pick and highlight all my alignments. Something real quick, starting in style. If I right click on style, just some really quick tips. I want all those from existing to layout. Select OK. Now all my styles are layout. Nice. So that looks pretty. So from that standpoint, that's creating alignments. If someone gave me alignments from just lines and arcs with parcels. So the other thing is, if I highlight these, so something real quick, because it wouldn't be complete unless we selected similar, and then we said from select similar, let's create parcels from objects. Pretty straightforward. I'm not going to put any distances or anything like that. There's all my parcels. So whoever laid this out in regular CAD, maybe it took some time to do that by offsetting lines and getting distances. I could do that in seconds with Civil 3D. So moving on here. I got the same process here. The only difference is I want to do this by layout now. So I want to do it with intent on my design. So from that, I'm going to say alignment creation tools. From that alignment creation tools, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to call this rows. I'm not going to use design-based criteria. I'm going to use my layout tab. In reference to my alignment style, I'm going to select OK. From that, I have some parameters up here. These parameters, if I select this arrow down, I have curve and spiral settings. From that, we're going to use a clothoid curve. There's different types of curves that we want to use. NSW cubic parabola is newer. Sinusoidal, halfway biquadratic, used over in Japan and China for high-speed rail. In the States, we want to use clothoid. Again, I want to put in curves. So I'm just going to leave it at 200 because I'm laying this out by hand. So I'm going to select tangent with curves. So the beauty of tangent with curves is I'm going to start at this endpoint. So I'm just going to also snap to this endpoint. And then I'm just going to start picking points. So I see that there's a curve right there. I'm just going to kind of go there in terms of thinking where my point of intersection is here. Over here. And then I'm going to come up, well, exit on my next point. So in a little bit here, let's do that. So we'll come up here again. Tangent with curves. And the beauty of working with this is we kind of can lay out what curve we want in here in reference to our site. And then we're going to snap to this endpoint. I want these vertexes to be at these endpoints. So I'm going to snap here. The beauty of this is I can go in and put in specific parameters. Now, we can clearly see that that curve distance is probably 200. This curve radius is probably 1,500. No big deal. If I pick on my alignment, I have the ability to edit. I have the ability to edit, which is what I want to be able to do. So my point of intersection, my curve radius, I just snap to nearest, get it close. Pretty straightforward. So I'm able to move things around in terms of what I want to create. Move this out a little bit more in terms of what I want to be able to create. So you can get it as close as you want in reference to your alignment. So from that alignment, now we want to look at this curve. Move this down just a little bit in terms of this intersection. Smooth that out. So even if we needed a little tangent in there, we could do that. I just want to get across the point that we want to be able to manipulate our alignments in reference to what we get from a architect or a vendor. So I'm going to create my next one, which is pretty straightforward. I'm going to come from left to right in reference to create my next alignment. So I'm going to create an alignment by layout. No big deal. I'm going to give this alignment a name. This alignment name is going to be called Parker. Pretty straightforward. Parker Place. I got some pretty creative names that I've kind of run into over the years. And I'm just going to select OK. It brings up this dialog box. I'm going to pick this arrow down and select tangent with curves. I'm going to snap to this endpoint. When I snap to this endpoint, I'll just come right here and pick this point. Come right here and pick this point. So there's my endpoint. Right now, I just have tangent. One of the things that we run into is we can put a free curve fillet between two entities. Here's my tangent in, here's my tangent out. It prompts me, do I want a curve radius greater than 180 for my angle? Is the solution curve greater than or less than, that angle is less than 180, so I'll hit enter. So then it says 200-foot curve. I'm going to put a 1,200-foot curve in there. And there's that 1,200-foot curve. So I can create almost anything that I want in reference to someone giving me data. And we'll make that curve a little bit bigger. Someone giving me data, move that over a little bit. And I'm right there. And clearly, creating curves and data from polylines is going to be, but they may not be tangent. They may not be based upon my design parameters. So we definitely want to consider those things. So if we came back down, move this back up a little bit. And then let's change the radius here. So we can just get it close. So from that, we also have this last one up here. So I'm going to close that. The beauty of working, again, with the alignment is I can come in here and say, edit alignment geometry, and say from my sub-entity editor, I'm going to pick the sub-entity. From that sub-entity, it tells me that's 2,100 feet. I want that to be 1,500 feet. There's my 1,500-foot radius. So now I can move this down and around to get that close to the 1,500 foot. So nothing that we can't do in reference to our alignments. So now we're going to create this last alignment from object. And not from object, we're just going to create this last alignment. So right there, you can see that there's some kind of little curve in there. So from that, we're just going to go alignments, create by layout. This row we're going to call Mary Park Place. So from that, I'm just going to select OK. And then the same process. When I come into tangents, I'm going to do tangent with curves. Select OK. My start point is going to be here. I'm going to go to this endpoint, snap it right to it, and then snap right to this endpoint. And there is a curve in there. From that, we can add in a vertex. So I'm going to add in a PI. Bang, right there. From that PI, now I'm going to add in a curve. So I'm going to select free curve fillet between here and here. It's less than 180 and I say that's 200. So now that curve, which is here, if I pick on that, I can move that down to here in terms of that curve. At any point in time, I still have these parameters where I can come in and select my subset entity from my alignment. And it gives me that information. So 1850, let's put 1850 in there. Let's keep it simple. Here's 1850. I can change my degree of curvature if I wanted to. So now that I have my alignments, creating an alignment from a polyline, again, most designers use polylines, lines, or arcs to get past generating that horizontal control from the projects. I mean, it's quite common for surveyors to kind of generate polylines for you from center to center to right away, which we could have offset also. So there's a lot of different ways that you can accomplish some of the same things. I know some of you out there have been doing this for some time. So offsetting from the center line and creating an alignment would probably be simple for you guys. And I understand that. The thing that you want to keep in mind is, you know, drawing simple lines may not address your design parameters, specifically with horizontal geometry. So we definitely want to keep that in mind, and creating an alignment by layout addresses that. So for the most part, those have been addressed, whether you get lines or polylines, or you lay it out from scratch. Oh, and this last row here, for time purposes, what we're going to do is we're going to just say create from polyline. How about that? Time purposes. Okay, it shows me that arrow in the direction that it's going in, and based upon that arrow, what we want to give that street name, we're going to give it a street name of Alex, right? That's what I thought I called it, Alex. Okay, so that'll do it. Alex Avenue. So that's the first part. In my PowerPoint, we talked about pieces and parts to make our corridor. So from that, we want to do our alignments, which is our horizontal aligned geometry. We want to do some sampling of that with a surface. So I got these alignments with a surface. So I've created these alignments already. In the case that someone says, well, how did you create those? I showed you how I created those. So there's my alignments. Now we have this kind of a surface, you know, this tin surface. If I pick on it, if I right click, you know, those don't look like the sharpest contours in terms of smoothness. So I don't have to look at them. I have a style where I don't have to look at them. So I select apply, select OK. I forgot to build the contours from a surface. So from that, no big deal. Surface 1, we built this surface from contours. If I hold my cursor, for those beginners out there, I build my surface from contours. From the contours, I build a surface model. From that surface model, it gives me my Z elevation and my alignment offsets at each alignment. From those alignment offsets, as I move around, it's going to give me station and offset for each of my alignments. No big deal. Okay? We already see how I created the parcels. We have the alignments in there. From that, we need to surface and sample a profile. So from that, the first thing I want to do is, you know, you can pick on an alignment here, and up in the ribbon, we can select surface profile. So there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of get through Civil 3D, but you know, one of the things, I'm coming from old school, or I'm an old school CAD guy, and I like to go from left to right and down. I'm just going to go to the pull-down menu and select create profile from a surface. We have specific alignments here. In the midst of ripping and running through alignments, I didn't name those alignments. So one of the things that allows me flexibility is I can come in here and select the alignment that I want. So I picked on the alignment. So alignment number 3, I'm generating it from the surface. It's 1,400 feet. I'm going to select, add the alignment. I can sample offsets to the left and right of my alignment to get elevations. I'm going to draw this in the profile view. From the profile view, it's showing me alignment number 3. It's going to be the parent alignment name. And then I'll select next. And then it shows me the length of my alignment and then the profile view height. And then what specifically is going to be displayed. And then my elevation sensations is going to be down at the bottom. If I wanted those at the top, I'm going to select the top. But I want those at the bottom. And I'm going to select next. And we're not going to be concerned about cut and fill as of yet. So I'll select create profile view. Then I'll go right over here to the side, and in form number 3, there's my profile of that alignment. So there's my horizontal alignment shown vertically in a profile. So from that, we're going to do the other alignments. So I'm going to come up to alignments, up to profiles, create profile from the surface. Specifically, I'm going to go in and choose my alignment here. So I'll pick this alignment. That's going to grab my alignment, number 1. I'm going to add the surface. So do this a little bit faster for those who are beginners, a little bit more acclimated to what I'm doing now. Those who are intermediate, we're getting to the meat of the sandwich. So we'll select OK. We're going to go to profile view. We'll select next, create profile view. So that is profile number 1. So we'll put that at profile number 1. So I'm going to cut on my object snap, and then under my object snap, some of the nice things I typically will use is this object snap tracking, so I can kind of line things up. So if I come in here and I just hold on there, I can snap and track, where I want my profile to be up here. There's that profile. Okay, so now we got those 2. So we'll come right back, profiles, and we're going to do this a little faster. We're going to select a different profile, different alignment, select alignment, and I can select it 2 or 4. But from here, I can just grab it. Select that in, select draw profile view, select create profile view. So a little bit faster. And we'll go here. In terms of time purposes, we'll just put that right there. There's my other profile. And then last but not least, we're going to create another profile from surface to sample it. That one is going to be alignment 4. So imagine that. We'll select draw on profile view, and then we'll select create profile view. So, and then we'll just put it right down here. No big deal. There's my alignment 4. So there's my 4 profiles. So based upon my profile, typically what we would do in reference to creating a profile, excuse me, which is also a part of our surface sampling. And profile information is really the backbone of our vertical design. Civil 3D takes advantage of this surface profile or sampling of this data, our design data, and external input data if I wanted to. So the most basic designs require a profile. So we're going to look at some of these tools in terms of creating. One of the things that I typically think about in terms of a site is cut and fill. Whether I'm starting from a detention pond, whether I'm starting from a lot, or whether I'm starting from a road, I'm thinking cut and fill. So one of the things I want to do is create a finished grade layout for each one of these profiles. So from each one of these profiles, I'm going to create a layout. So from this layout, I'm going to go to profiles, create layout. It's going to prompt me to select my profile view. There's my profile view. I typically will tell it finished grade. And then a design profile complete label set. I typically will start with a curve setting of a parabolic curve 150 feet. I'm going to use the defaults. I'm going to select OK. Then I start out similar to what I did with horizontal alignments, draw tangents or curves. So I'm going to start at this endpoint, kind of go according to the ground here. And for the most part, put a little, if we zoom in there, we'll put a little bump in here, no big deal. And from that, come up. And let's just say we need to drive kind of through there. So we'll put this on here, just as an example. And then we'll cut our alt snaps back on. And then I'll snap to the endpoint. There's my finished grade. Okay, so we got some text that's kind of going in the wrong place here. So if I pick on that, we can move that down, drag that down, no big deal. We can drag that down, and I can specifically tell text where I want to go. And as a small shortcut, we're on alignment profile number 1. From that, if I pick my profile view and go to profile view properties, I want to be able to tell it specifically there's 2 different surface profiles. One is the existing ground surface. The other one is the finished grade. Select OK. And now we can see the difference between the 2 there. So we have, in essence, the 2 things that we need for our corridor. The third thing that we need is a typical section. Thanks to the beauty of working with Civil 3D, if I hit Control 3, we have typical sections. How we can build those sub-assemblies. Now remember, I talked about at the beginning, there's a lot involved in terms of using these. So the first thing that I would do, I'm going to create my own typical section. And then from that, we're going to see that we can have a library of typical sections also. So the first thing that I'm going to do is on the corridors, I'm going to create an assembly. This assembly, I talked about the anatomy of a corridor. So this assembly, I'm going to select OK. We'll put the assembly like right here underneath. And I'm just going to add something really simple, like basic lanes. So this is just going to be some pavement. So I'm not going to require much. I'm going to say basic lane. It's going to be to the right side. It's going to be 12 feet wide, -2% slope. I just pick my assembly. That creates that lane. It has the shape. It has the link, and it has the point code, anatomy of an assembly. Okay, for a typical section. So from that, if I move that out the way, from that, I'm going to do basic curve and gutter. We can change the parameters in terms of our basic curve and gutter, how we want to lay out that design for our typical section. I'm just going to come right here and select that point code. And then from that, we're going to do a basic shoulder. So here's my basic shoulder. From that basic shoulder, I'm going to give it some parameters. So it says a width of 6. I'm driving a width of 3. I'm driving down the road. Typically, I can't even see a shoulder on the side. So I'm going to say my shoulder is going to be 5 feet. And it's going to slope towards the road. So we're going to take off this negative. And then I'm just going to select this top point code. There's my shoulder. And then for all intents and purposes, this basic side cut, slope, and ditch puts in a stitch and cut. It puts in a daylight and fill. So if I went to help, just to kind of show you really quickly, it's going to show me parameters in terms of those features. And I can just put in specific a keyword in terms of that daylight assembly. Okay, so I'm going to pick basic size, slope, ditch, and then I'm just going to accept all these parameters. So cut slope, fill slope, force slope, and bottom width. So I'll just pick it. So that gives me half of my symmetrical road in terms of my assembly. So I'll hit escape twice. I'll highlight half of my my assembly, and then I'll just go right up here and select mirror. When I select mirror, I'll pick on it, There's my typical section. So, as an example, I'm going to right click and go to assemblies. And I'm going to say this is assembly 1. We'll select Control 3. I'm going to go to my assemblies tab. And I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm going to do one with a basic assembly, basic lane transition. I can have a library of these things. So I'll pick on it. There's my basic. It has a sidewalk and curb and gutter. Okay, so that assembly, I'm going to hit escape twice. And I'll just pick on it. Right click and go into assembly properties. And that's going to be called transition. So I can give those names if I wanted to. Right now, I just have the 3 essential ingredients to build a corridor. So from that, we'll take a look at our first row in terms of a corridor. Something simple. And if we look here, we have this like knuckle. Part 2, we may get into knuckles and doing cul-de-sacs, things like that. As of right now, we're just thinking about this corridor, something simple. So if I go to corridor, create a corridor, I'm going to create a corridor based upon an alignment and a profile. This alignment 1, I can select my alignment. I'm going to pick it. I already know this alignment here is 3. And I pick on that, and that's why naming becomes critical. So I want to be able to kind of address what beginners are looking at and what those who have experience in terms of building these. So the profile for alignment 3, and we'll just go up here. We'll select this profile because something is going on here. So alignment 3, we'll select this profile. It says profile is not associated with the current. Oh, sorry. Sorry. No wonder. We don't have a profile and nobody said anything. So we'll come in here and whip it in right quick. So we'll go to profiles, create by layout, because we're going to do a long row. We're going to call this finish grade. So things that a typical person is going to run into, we're going through. For the most part, we'll use complete set. We'll start from our existing ground in terms of where our horizontal alignment is. So I'll pick there, and we'll just come up a little bit here, come over here, come here. We won't get too crazy. We'll just zoom in, and we'll pick right there. So there's our profile. So we'll go back up here to corridors. Create a corridor. From that, we're going to put a alignment 3, finish grade 1, assembly 1. We're going to target our existing ground surface in terms of daylighting. It's going to bring that up, but we're going to select OK, and it's going to ask me to rebuild my corridor. So I'm going to do that. So there's my corridor. It's that green, funky looking thing. If I pick on it, I right click and go to Object Viewer. So one of the things I always kind of take a look at is what this is looking like in 3D. So I want to zoom into a specific area, then hold my shift key down, and then I can look at what I built in terms of my corridor. Pretty straightforward. And I zoom in here. So there's my corridor. And we'll make that a little bit bigger. I got 2 lanes. I got cut. I got fill. I got my shoulders. So I got some daylighting in there. So that's building a corridor. That's a corridor model. Ultimately, what we want to get from that corridor model is a surface. So I just go right here, pick on my corridor model and go to surfaces. From the surface, we want to do the top link. We want to add in that top. So we're going to create a corridor surface. And I'm going to say road. And then from that, we're going to add the top. We always want to use it as a break line. In terms of overhang, we're going to do the top link. If I was doing some quantities, now I need to add a datum in there, which is required to go from the top to the bottom of my subassembly in terms of my lane. So we're just doing the top, and I talked about a boundary. So I'll pick on it, roll boundary, corridor extents, select OK, rebuild my corridor. And if I hit escape now, I've built a surface model for my corridor. If I go to object viewer, there's my surface. We want to show that shaded. Okay, so there we go. So there's my corridor model. Okay, so that's some really quick corridor modeling. Okay, now we think about what we would have to do in a situation when we had some really steep slopes. So right now we're at 125. Here's my alignment. I'm going to pick on this surface just to kind of give you an idea. I've already put in my finished grade for my corridor. If I go to my object viewer, if I want to look at that in 3D, there's some really steep slopes in here. So if I have really steep slopes, again, I build that corridor in terms of a roll, but what if I want to build that corridor with retaining walls and things like that to address some of these really steep slopes? Well, I'll just use an assembly that addresses that. From that, I'm going to create, there's clearly a surface here. There's clearly my horizontal alignment. I want to create a corridor. From this corridor, I have a center line layout. I have an alignment. I have two assemblies. I'm going to use this completed. It's completed. So I'm going to select existing ground and tie in and set baseline and region parameters. That's already set, even though it's going to bring that dialog box. And then I'll select OK and rebuild my corridor. So I'm doing things a lot quicker right now in terms of what we got. Wow, that looks crazy. So from that, if I pick on that and pick on my surface, right click and go into object viewer, there's some dynamics that we can utilize in terms of building corridors. It's just a matter of what you want to be able to build. So there's that surface, right? So we got two ditches in there in terms of that surface. So that doesn't address all this existing nonsense that's coming over. So if I pick on this, just to kind of show you what I built really quickly, if I go into object viewer, here's this corridor. So it's got some parameters in here. I got a retaining wall in there. So how would that look if a surface was built? So if I pick on that and select corridor surface, I want to build a corridor surface. So from that surface, we're going to add in the top. We're going to do as break lines, and we're going to do that overhang for the top link. And I'm going to select OK, and I'm going to select rebuild the surface. From that, we didn't select to build a boundary. So I'm going to address that really quick. If I pick on that corridor, go into corridor properties, on my surfaces tab, we have a boundary. So go to boundaries, corridor extent, select apply, select to rebuild the corridor, and select OK. And there's my boundary. So now we have this in terms of our corridor surface. And that's looking pretty good. But how does that address my existing ground? So I'm going to do something really quick. I'm going to create a surface called final. I create a surface called final. What's the standard? We need to give this some borders and contours, right? Borders and contours. Select OK. Select OK. From that surface called final, we want to add in a couple of those surfaces. So the one surface we're going to add in existing ground. Shazam, there's my existing ground. Then we're going to add in that corridor surface. Select OK. Wow. Now, when we pick on that and go into Object Viewer, a little bit more clarity. But things take time. There's no big red easy button, right? Things take time to build. So you can build whatever you want. It doesn't have to be just a row. You know, it doesn't have to be a row. It can be a river or cross section. But again, we're going to try to address some questions in reference to corridor modeling, because it is 1:30, but we got a little bit of beginner, intermediate, and advanced in reference to our corridor model. So one of the questions I know was, how did I build this? But if you come over here, these are some conditional subassemblies that allow me to do cut and fill with the retaining wall and things like that. See that retaining wall there? If you use that in 2018, you have some really nice things in reference to working with retaining walls. But Amy, are you still there? Is anyone still there?
Yes, I am still here, and it looks like we have quite a few people still on.
They are still on this call?
Okay. They are. And we've had
Wonderful.
some questions. If you have any questions, please type those in now. This might be the question that you were referring to on how you created that. But there was a question on how to create horizontal alignment, not from an object, but manually inputting the curve data. And they say when I said manually, I mean placing the northing, easting, STA, PIs, etc., basically information that we get from DOT PDF plans.
So there's a couple ways that you could kind of address that, and I will try to address that quickly. But under alignments, you can create that by layout. So I'm just going to do something really quick. You can create that tabularly if you wanted to, with creating that from alignments. You can create it in a tabular format, or you can create it by putting in northing and easting. One of the things, if I create an alignment just from a line, one of the things that you want to be able to utilize also is the transparent commands. And from your transparent commands, you can put in northing, easting, angles, distances, if you wanted to. So you can do it tabularly, or you can do it based upon northing, easting, longitude, latitude, also bearing and distance. And if that doesn't address your question, just send Amy an email, and I will address that, whether it's GoToMeeting or a webcast.
Sounds good. Another question is, how do you tie in the mainline corridor and ramp properly?
I'm tying the main line corridor with what?
And ramp properly.
With the ramp properly? Now that's just transitioning. That's just transitioning. Now that gets a little bit more advanced, but you can do that in reference to transitioning. So as an example, let me just open up this drawing. This won't take long. Got a few things here. That's left, okay. Just doing some bridge and rehab. So being able to tie that stuff in, it's pretty straightforward. It's just, it requires a little bit more in terms of bringing in a ramp, but this is all one corridor. So it's just adding in a baseline in reference to getting that ramp in there, but you just have to add in a baseline to your corridor. So you can do that. So again, that would be, to do a corridor like this, if you use InfoWorks and Civil 3D, probably can do this in an hour or two. Let's put 2 there. Okay, next question.
All right, the next 2 questions are just about the PowerPoint slides, and if we can send those. We will be sending a link to the recording of this webinar, but we can send a PDF of the slides also. I know most of what Ken showed was an actual live demo, so the recording might be more beneficial, but we can get a PDF of those PowerPoint slides as well and send that in the follow-up email that everybody will receive tomorrow morning.
And one thing to note also, because a lot of you have either taken training or did different things in reference to getting to a certain point with Civil 3D, that burst training that we talked about at the beginning, which is only a 2.5, 3-hour session, it focuses specifically on what you would want to work on in terms of with corridors. And I had to do a lot of things in 45 minutes or so, but we get deep down and detailed in terms of transitioning and targeting and corridor modeling, things like that, and transition lanes, deceleration lanes, acceleration lanes, slip lanes, roundabouts. Those are did in a burst training, which is like a 3-hour session where we go from start to completion in terms of that. And it's all documented. And again, just send the email to Amy if you have an interest. I mean, if you do runways, we do things like that too. So runways are easy. It's just a big corridor, you know, a big typical section, you know. So if you do bridge, if you do, there's a bridge module that goes from InfraWorks to Civil 3D into Revit and back and forth. There's a river for stream restoration. You can import HEC-RAS straight from Civil 3D into HEC-RAS. So there's a lot of things in reference to corridors that you can build that doesn't typically have to be or necessarily have to be a road. I also have a parking lot for a curb that I wanted to address. There's a lot of things that I wanted to address, but again, you know, outside of 45 minutes or even an hour, it's difficult when you have different variety of learning curves for individuals that are watching.
Yeah, and we have, I have received some interest on taking a more in-depth dive on corridors. So we will work on getting that on the schedule and let all of you guys know when that training will be. There's also a question about, will there be an in-depth discussion on daylight sub-assemblies in the future? I've been having trouble understanding those, and that's something that we can look into for either a future webinar or a future training. Ken and I will discuss that and get see if we can get some interest on that or some personalized training. So that's great. I think that's all of the questions though, Ken.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks for joining our afternoon webcast. Hopefully you got something from this. And if not, we are very open to suggestions in terms of what you would want to see. And if you had a list of items, we would address that also, either by a webcast based upon that list of items of interest or specifically training interest.